Welcome back to Giro 3 YouTube channel. As you've seen in the heading, this is part 3 of the Computator CT-1000 Rotator refurbishment, upgrade and everything else. So a bit of time has passed since part 2. Other things got in the road. So things have happened and moved forward just recently. Number one is I finally got around to getting the casings glass bead blasted, and I have painted them in this pewter colour, grey pewter colour. So they're all happy now. And let's do the same thing here with the actual the bearing ring. So it's all good. I'll put that back down there again. We'll set that back on there. And the same applies to the lower casing. It's going to look really good. So we can now move forward, and we have moved forward quite a bit just in this last week with a few of the mods and stuff that I've done and upgrades to this. Now you have to go back and look at previous videos to visually see where I got up to. But basically, I had to. I've installed a 100 volt AC motor and a 100 volt solenoid into this rotator. So if you go back and look at the previous videos, you'll see what I had to do to get that to happen. So basically, there was a bit of a stall there for a while in a number of reasons. But I'm going to get into that in a second. So basically I'm going to lay it down, and the main, I'll put down here, this thing's really heavy. So the main thing being that caused a bit of waylaying time was the shafts and how they were they'd flogged out the chassis here. So basically I have addressed that now and a few things. So I'm going to make sure it's in front of there. I'm going to, this is basically, it's been a dry assembly. I need to disassemble it to show you what's going on, or what has gone on, and the upgrades that I've done to this half of the rotator, because this part has already been described. So basically, so I've done a few things here, so which I'll disassemble it, and then I can reassemble it with grease and everything else, and we can get this thing happening. So a couple of the main things that I've done is I've changed a few parts after reviewing how these top gears have been wearing, and I believe that this top chassis has been flexing down because all the force is here on this gear. It's always pushing down and pulling crossways, so that's why we had problems with the gears, which was mentioned before. But I think that everything has been moving because they only had these little, I think they were like about an 8mm shaft in aluminium. One there, one there, one there, and one there. So I'm going to take this top chassis off, and we shall investigate what I've done to physically make this better. A lot better. So we'll lift the actual top plate off, or side plate. So what I have done to get around the problem with the holes, these holes were all flogged out except for the bottom one. The motor one was okay, which is down here. These two here were the worst. They're worse, even more worse in this. As you look, go back to the old video and you'll see how bad it was in there. But these were not as good either. So basically what I've done is I have removed the washers they had on the top, and I have made up some new bushes. So basically I have drilled these out, and I have made these washers up at the right height. As you see, they're different heights. And what I've done is I've gone over the edge of the shaft so it steps down on the shaft, so I've got more surface area for it to ride onto. Well, not that the shafts spin anymore, but it actually gives it more purchase on here. When I made these, I basically have pressed them in. So basically I heated this up a little bit, didn't want to heat it too much, but I heated it up and I got these cold and I physically just pressed them in. They did have a bit of a knolling or striation on the side to make them hold better as well. You probably can see just there, little indents which I make with a chisel around the flat edge, and they've basically been pressed in. They are working really well in that regard. So basically that's one part that's now done. I'll leave that sit there. So basically now, instead of having big, I think they're quite thick washers, spacing washers, now I only have a small amount of shims which I can get the spacing just about right. Another thing I found out too is number 1 gear had a chipped tooth. I didn't even notice it, I mean, far out. So basically I have actually replaced this gear. I got a hold of another gear and I've cut it down and I've pressed it into here. Again, heated up the outer casing and made the center casing cool and basically still pressed them together, and then we've punched the back of this. So I'm going to put all these aside for now. Number 2 gear was, and I had to polish up the shafts and everything as well, but it's just, yeah, as it all goes. So as I said before, the gears are all in good condition. So basically just get them all off. And now on number 5 gear, I've re-spaced all the gears because some were a bit too close, and I've actually got a very thin washer in here. It's just over a mil. So that's in there. We have, I'm going to take the spacer out before I lose it under number 5. Number 6, I've done a bit of cleaning up on these, but only found out when I went to clean these up and do a bit of polishing work on it, these have actually been hardened. So basically here we go. Here's our retaining spring which maintains force, and I've actually done a bit of work inside of here, polished up and everything in there. So what we have done, I'll just lift him up. So first thing that I did before even doing the shafts is I replaced the 8mm with these 14mm. These come from a Kempro KR400, and basically I just had to shorten them a little bit, and basically you probably can't see it, they bolted into the holes which are originally there, and they actually got a step in each end of them. I had to cut it down and put a step in this end to sit it into the actual chassis, so it's a nice fit, hoping that this might stop it wanting to twist downward department. So we've got one at the back there, and we've got the other one on this side. Now as you can see, I had to calculate out and make sure everything was going to fit. It's only about 1.5 mm gap between the pot gear there. So basically, and you can see the step in the gear. So these only run a 4mm screw, where these ones run a 6mm. So basically, and this 6mm I've actually had to, you can't see it, I'll put my hand behind it instead of that there. I've countersunk them ever so slightly because I had to keep them away from the casing, because the original ones were countersunk on this side, like they originally countersunk, and they would get really close to the chassis. I actually did take a little bit of the casing out of the chassis, just a little bit out, to physically get rid of, make them fit in a bit easier. So then I decided to countersink them, and I should have done that in the first place, but that's how it goes. So basically, after doing that, I got that all right. I finally stripped it all down again, which was just a chassis only, and I finally took it to a friend of mine, and we actually silver soldered the 3 shafts in place. So basically, once I'd made this, it was all bolted together on all these posts, and physically we had to strip all it out first. We put flux on all the ends of the shafts. We basically assembled it, and then we basically, or he, I should say, he physically silver soldered it. In doing the silver soldering, the zinc plating, the gold zinc plating on this side and this side was basically stuffed, and there's a little bit of throwback onto here as well because there's a fair bit of heat because it's using a oxyacetylene on it. The top here was okay. So I had to, once I got the shafts silver soldered in, I did all the cleaning up. I then undercoat, rubbed this all back in the right positions, and physically then undercoated it with a steel primer, and I painted it in a silver both sides. As you can see, you might notice all the wiring is already done on this side. I'm just getting ready to do the whole thing. Certain things have got to go together in certain order, otherwise you can't do things. So I've also got the limit switches in. That's how the limit switches work. These are brand new ones. And all the screws, which I mentioned before, these were long, and I've actually just cut them back just recently. Now everything's sort of finalised, so it's moving forward really well. And you might note I did not paint here. Well, these are rubbing surfaces, and basically I've just left them. I'll put grease on that, because this one here is just basically going to rub the paint off. So may as well not have it there. So a bit of grease, a bit of grease, and a bit of grease will stop any rusting. And basically this is where we're up to. So after toing and froing and getting everything happening, there's a few more things that I've got to do yet in the wiring department. I've already got these tapped. There's one there and one there. They're going to hold these little mounting brackets for this one's for the capacitor, and there'll be another one sitting just here. That'll be to wire in the not the other way around, my bad. Capacitor goes there, and this is going to be for the solenoid. So the wires are pretty short for the solenoid, so I'm going to sit that there, terminate these into here. I'll shorten these wires down to suit, and then we run the wires out to the socket. So basically there's two of those to go in, so they're just going to sit here, and they're going to be, as you can see, I've straightened them out. I'm just going to sit up hard against the edge here like that. You'll see that when I do the wiring, which would be the next part of this probably video. I'm going to do this videos. I'm going to be stitched together, I suppose, with other videos. And I've got to reassemble all the solenoid, but I've got to get certain things done first. So the wedge, I should say, the solenoid brake and everything. But the next thing I've got to do is physically start the reassembly process. I may even reassemble the brake first, so I'm not grabbing hold of grease and everything. So that's probably the next thing I shall do. So this will be what else has happened here? I've got all the bolts, I've got all the screws, top hats, E-clips and everything. I'd showed you these before. These are all the mounting points for the and sort of like brake wedge holders and everything. So, but you go back and look at the previous video, and there will be one more video after this particular one, which will show the controller I'm going to be using with this rotator. So here we go. So I shall be back shortly, and I shall have the brake assembly all together, and we can then move forward to physically reassembling the gears, and this is going to get very close soon. Okay, we shall be back. Bye. Okay, we're back. I now have all the brake wedges in, and the solenoid activation lever and everything else, and I've rechecked all the spacings, and as well I did another little mod. I've actually added a spring from I've got everything in this rotator. So basically with this spring on the bottom, the actual wedges were actually pulling really badly when they're in. So I decided to put a spring on this side and bolt in through here, if you can see it, and bolt into the arm, and this also helps pull this one back, and instead of it just all relying on this to pull it back. So basically, as you can see, and now when it's in, the wedges are actually loose and they can move around, where before they were a bit tight and they were pushed over like this, and now a bit tight because the solenoid has been pulled into a position it didn't like to go to. So I've actually changed. So what I can do in here, I can change the spacing between the arm and the other arm off the actual solenoid. So I can actually, I had originally put 2 washers in there. Well, now I've got 3. I basically just redesign things, or just it's like fine tuning. Since I put this extra spring on, I had to put that in there as well. So basically that's in there. So the next thing to do will be to start assembling all the gears, and then I can do all the finishing, all the wiring and everything off. So there we go. We're up to date. I might have to turn it this way. You can see down through there. I'll do it from the top as well. I'll have enough light shining in there. So there we go. No problems. We shall catch you shortly. Okay, we're back. Righty, I have now greased and assembled all the gears, or drivetrain. I've even applied a bit of grease, since these posts are very close. I've even applied a bit of grease to these so we can actually maintain the grease onto all the gears. So there we go there. So what I'm going to do, let's see if I can get in front of the camera. I've just done a very light grease on the bushes and the holes there for the motor. Oh, I forgot to do the motor one. Oh, it's got plenty of grease on there anyway, so let's assemble this without getting covered in too much grease. There we are. Oh, there we got polka dots on me. Okay, so let's just wipe that off so that transfers it onto the. We have. I might even pull these back out again and give them some Loctite, I think, too, as well. But just for this, we will just show it going together. And these are Allen keys. These are the ones that were countersunk. And M6 as opposed to M4s. So just do that like that. And I shall go away and I shall actually remove each one of these, and I shall put Loctite on each one, just a small amount of Loctite, so they don't vibrate loose or anything. So okay, we're up to that stage. Right. Okay, we are now up to putting on my little tabs for the wiring. So basically we're going to undo my screws that I've already sat in here waiting to be put in here. So they're going to go in that way, so basically the shoulder, the edge will be going against the edge of this. Let me put that back into there. I've even elongated the holes to give myself adjustment. Get these screwed in the right place. And then I can actually physically make sure it's hard up against. Keep my fingers out of the road if I can. So I will go and I'll get the wiring done up to this stage, and then I'll be back when I do that. So I'll do this other one. Get out of the road without losing the washer. So I've actually put a flat washer and a spring washer on these, because these holes are a little bit elongated now, and they're also designed for M4s, and these are only M3s. I didn't want to be, oops, help me put it up the right way, making boo-boos. Okay, let's put that into there, push it in hard. And we'll do that. As I've mentioned before, most of our capacitors are going to go on this one. I mean this one here, and the solenoid is going to go onto these ones here. Those two there, and the motorcycle capacitor will be on these here. I still haven't decided which capacitor to use yet, as I mentioned in the very first video. This will probably be it. I shall see. I'll look at the other ones I have, but this is the one for this motor. It's a 6.8. The other ones are a 6, if I remember correctly. So I just have to determine which one I'm going to use, but most likely this one, I think. No problems. Okie dokie, we shall be back. Okie doke. We now have all the wiring done. The motor start capacitor is in. Or flaring out. Oopsies. And I've also wired the plug, 7-pin LTW, and I put a bit of clear over the wiring here, so I can actually sort of control the wires where it goes. We don't want things moving up into places we don't want to move to. So there we go. It's all getting very getting very close now. I've even still got a bit of room down in here, so the wire can really come up through there just about. I'm actually getting it to sit just there like that. So basically when it goes together, oh, I've got lost a nut from there. So basically what I've got to do now is I've got to get the controller together and do some testing before I actually physically assemble this into the housing, because I don't want to pull the whole thing back apart again. I just want to make sure everything's working with the controller, and do a dry assembly, I should say. We just just loosely put things together with no grease, just to nothing on the no bearing grease or anything, just to physically check that everything is okay before I go ahead and physically do a finishing off assembly. So we shall be back. Okie doke, I have now put the actual main chassis and gearbox into the housing, and I have installed the top run of bearings. As you can see, we have the blocks, these wedge blocks that someone made up at some time or other. Now they're installed, and we have very little movement in here. I've done my preliminary alignment and testing. All is good. So now, since I've got my north point here, I'm going to drop on the top housing, whichever way you want to call it. Let's see if I can do this around the camera. Well, that's dropping it. I've also greased up the bottom bearing track as well, which is easier to do than doing it after the fact. So there we go, that's on. I'm going to install the bottom bearings and then I'll be back. Okay, bottom bearings are in, and I've also put anti-seize into each of the mounting bolt holes for the bearing ring, and I've also applied a small amount of grease to both surfaces of the bearing ring and the top housing, because these rotators do not have a water step in it, as in a step up to stop water running into these. So not that it's as big a problem with these ones, since the bearing track is so far down. I just prefer to put a bit of grease on it. As you can see, I've greased the bottom bearing track, and I put a small amount of grease on there, and once it all goes on, I shall clean any excess off. So we shall see if we can get this in here. Oh, I should actually use my north point, not my south point. There's my north point, and there's my mark here. There we go. Give a bit of a wiggle backwards and forwards. Righty. Get rid of some of this grease on my fingers. And since I've already got the anti-seize already in there, I can just put these. I'm using socketed cap screws for this, and a washer and a spring washer. So put all these in, and this rotator is nearly ready to go. Oh well, I'm going to do my final alignment, and then we'll be back with part 4 with the controller part. So we'll quickly do these up, nip each one up, and then I'll tighten these up off camera, and we will be back after I do the alignment, final alignment I should say. So we'll nip these up, and then I'll be do the there we go. Righty-yody. Okay. All done. Just going to do my final alignment bits and pieces, and we should be back with part 4. Oh, part 4. That's it.